This happened to me about 2 to 3 years ago. When I was 16, I used to work at a fast food restaurant, and I live in a place where we have all 4 seasons. At this point in time, it was winter, so it got dark pretty early, around 5 to 6 in the evening. I was called to come into work this particular day, but the weather was kind of bad, causing us to not have any customers. As a result, we had to close the store early. It was about 5:30 in the evening when my manager left, locking the store and making me wait outside for my ride. About 20 minutes had passed and she left, and I was really cold, so I decided, regrettably, that I would walk to a friend's house just a few blocks away. It was about a 10-minute walk, and I planned to wait for my ride there. The store I worked at was on a busy street that was near a residential neighborhood. As I walked away from the store, I started walking down the residential street behind the store. I was walking on the sidewalk to the left side of the street because there is only one sidewalk on the right side of the street. If I walked on the right sidewalk, I would only be able to walk on it for 1 block. Then I would have to walk the rest of the way on the road. There were also woods on that side of the road. It was convenient as well because on the left side of the street was my store, and there were no street lights. I walked about 3/4 of the block when I got this feeling that I was being watched. The block was long, making it about the equivalent of 2 blocks. The neighborhood was really dark, and at this point I had pretty much reached the end of the block and was getting ready to cross the street, when I noticed a silhouette of someone walking on the right side of the road near the woods. He looked to be about 5'9" to 5'10", and maybe around 180 to 200 pounds. I could not make out any features though. I am the type of person who is very aware of their surroundings and slightly paranoid, as I have been followed, almost kidnapped, stalked, and so on. You get the idea. So when I noticed him, I stopped walking and immediately got a sick feeling in my stomach. The man then noticed me and proceeded to walk slowly and yell out to me. He said, "Yo, come here, I want to talk to you." I said back, "No, I'm good, I'm only 16. Then I turned around and started walking back to my store. He continued to yell things at me, trying to convince me to come to him. At that point, something in me told me to run, and I did just that. As I was running, I know I should not have, but I turned my head to see if he was actually chasing me, and to my horror, he was. So I sped up and ran as fast as I could. Thankfully, as I reached the store, my ride had pulled up, so I ran to the car. As I tried to get in, the door was locked. It took about 20 seconds for them to unlock the car, which felt like hours. But eventually I got in and just broke down crying. Not going to lie, I am kind of out of shape, so my back was hurting from breathing so hard. And I was all frazzled. This was the first time I was chased on foot, and let me tell you, it is so much more scary, surreal, and intense being chased on foot than someone chasing you by car. Still to this day, I have added trauma from this incident, and it makes it hard to go anywhere by myself, especially in the dark. So to the man that chased after me in the dark, let's not meet again. Let me preface this story with this. I have always attracted creepers and found myself in bad situations. Recently, I've thought a lot about why, because I'm in the midst of a creeper problem right now. I think it's a combination of factors. For starters, I smile. A lot. It's partially because people compliment my smile. So with the put your best foot forward mindset, I tend to lead everything with a smile. More than once I've given a guy the wrong idea that I was flirting, which leads to the subsequent, "You were leading me on" whine. No, I was just being a genuinely decent and nice person, with a natural, bubbly, and friendly personality. I also have a fairly reckless regard for my personal safety, and tend not to see the worst in people and don't edit the scene quickly enough after my first pangs of uneasiness. I am constantly forgiving infractions in the mindset of, it wasn't that bad, they deserve another chance. I probably have close to a dozen stories I can post, but as a first-time user, I'll start with this one. This happened when I was 21 years old. I'm 23 now. I was in university in a small Canadian city. I mention that it's small because you could walk to all the important places within 45 minutes. So naturally, being a young and fairly broke student, my friends and I would walk to the clubs instead of opting to spend money on a cab. Young and wild, we'd rather spend our money on drinks and after-club pizza than safety. This was right after a fairly emotional breakup. I'm no stranger to breakups, but it's especially tough when the only reason to break up is that two people's lives are going in different directions despite being in love. Anyway, my mindset that night was to try and enjoy myself and forget about the breakup for a little while. I found myself in a club with my girlfriends, doing the normal post-breakup ritual, drinking, dancing, and getting moral support from my girls. Around 1:30 in the morning, I was tired, drunk, and on the verge of tears, so I decided to go home. With promises to text them when I got home and to catch the next cab, I left them in the club and headed outside. It was Canada in February, which means snow, ice, and lots of sand. The sand is more important than it seems. As usual, once I was outside, I decided to walk home. Now this city has a bad area at night. During the day, it's a nice park, but people are always warned to stay away from it at night. My apartment was just a quarter-mile or so from this park, in a more gentrified area. But the quickest way there from downtown was around this park. I was in a blue and black dress, tights, and insanely high heels, with my big winter jacket, stumbling around drunk on the sidewalk at about 1:30 or 2 in the morning. I know, not safe and very stupid. The heels were the main thing causing my problems because I had to walk slowly on the parts of the sidewalk that didn't have much sand. I was getting to the edge of the park and near my apartment in the big hotel on the street corner when I saw them. There were two of them just standing a few feet from a streetlight in my path, mostly hidden by shadow, just watching me. They were completely blocking my path. I considered getting off the sidewalk, but that meant vaulting a pile of snow and possibly being hit if a car came. So I kept walking, hoping they'd move once I came up to them or start walking away before then. When I was within a few feet of them, I said, "Excuse me," hoping they'd let me by. They didn't and instead introduced themselves, both with the same name. We'll call them Tom number 1 and Tom number 2. Tom number 1 started babbling about what a cold night it was and how they were about to go inside because they lived right up the street. Tom number 2 was just staring at me like I had no clothes on, every now and then looking at Tom number 1 and rubbing his mouth. Cold and uncomfortable, I smiled, nodded politely, and said I had to get home because my friends were waiting for me. They still didn't move. At this point, if I had been sober, I'm sure I would have been freaking out. Two strange men, both a lot bigger than me, not letting me get by and staring at me lasciviously. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately as it turns out, I wasn't sober and was really just starting to get annoyed more than anything. It was at this point that Tom number 2 spoke for the first time and said something along the lines of, "You look like you'd be good for a good lay. Maybe all three of us at once, or Tom can go first and then I'll go." This obviously caused me to snap into a little more wariness as I eyed them up in silence and considered my options. Tom number 1 just smiled at this as I took a step back, and he invited me back to their place. When I was silent, he said simply, If you want us to leave you be, we will, and you can get by. So I asked to get by, and Tom number 2 gave Tom number 1 a mischievous grin, and they stepped apart so I could get through. Again, sober me would have realized that having my back to them was not the greatest idea, but I wasn't thinking clearly. As soon as I got a couple of steps past them, one of them, I'm still not positive who, but I'm pretty sure it was Tom number 2, came up behind me and grabbed me around the waist with one arm and tangled one hand in my hair. It was really long at the time, down, and my hood wasn't up. He whispered in my ear, "Be quiet, 'cause you can scream all you want when we get to their place." He started dragging me backwards into an even less lit area, but drunk me decided to take action. If I had been sober, I honestly think I would have frozen, and then God knows what would have happened. I managed to turn around, ripping out a ton of my hair. That hurt the next morning, and punched Tom in the face. That hurt even more. He was so shocked that he immediately let go, and I took off in my 5-inch heels. I think the 2 Toms were so shocked that I fought back that they didn't even give chase. Luckily, the area beyond was well sanded. See, important. So I didn't slip a lot as I sprinted the last quarter mile to my apartment. I stumbled into the apartment, and my roommate, who was still awake, freaked out because apparently my hair was a wreck. My coat was unzipped, and I had mascara all down my face. I told her in broken sentences what happened, and she told me not to call the cops since I was drunk and now home safe. Great friend, right? The next morning, I woke up with my hand swollen to twice its size. Luckily, nothing was broken. I called my ex-boyfriend to tell him what happened. The next time I saw him, he taught me how to throw a punch without hurting myself, and applauded the fact that I could run in heels. I can honestly say that it was only the next morning that I really freaked out. The Toms had bad intentions, I'm sure of it. If I hadn't been able to get a shot off, who knows what those boys would have done to me. I moved to East Los Angeles the summer after high school. My parents bought the house from my aunt and uncle who had just moved out. We already had family in that area, so it felt familiar. The neighborhood was nice and quiet. The plan for me was to live with my parents and save money while I figured out what I wanted next. I was getting ready to start community college and apply to a medical assistant program. Back then, everyone had an opinion about East LA. People loved to describe it as dangerous, even though most of them had never been there. I grew up visiting my cousins in that same area, and it was never as dramatic as people made it sound. These places are not scary to me. They are just neighborhoods where people live. I met Michael at my cousin's house party that summer. He had tattoos and looked edgy. When he asked me out, I said yes. I was flattered and curious what he would be like. He told me he knew a place with the best guava nectar in town, and that we could go to a drive-in movie afterward. I actually laughed. I like guava nectar, but I had never heard anyone hype it up like that. But like I said, I was curious and I agreed. He parked at the drive-in first. He said we could leave the car there, walk to the restaurant, and come back for the movie. We even asked the employees if that was okay. They said yes, as long as we paid a small fee, which he did. Something about the plan felt strange. The restaurant was about a 20-minute walk away, and the movie started at 9 at night. It was close to 8. I asked him if it was smart to walk by ourselves so late. He smiled and said he thought I was not afraid of neighborhoods like this, since I had spent so much time in East LA. He said it like a challenge. I remembered mentioning that earlier, and he used my own words to keep me from saying no, so I went along with it. Very few people were on the street and it was dark. As we got closer to the restaurant, he stopped a few times to show me videos on his phone. They were silly clips that he thought were funny. I was uneasy about the walk. It felt like Michael wanted it to last longer than it should have. Something was off. Looking back, I think Michael was stalling. Then a car pulled up beside us. A masked man got out and walked toward us. For a second, I thought it might be a prank, like for a YouTube video. Then I heard his voice and he said, "I need your phone and wallet." I remember thinking he sounded young, maybe high school age. He also sounded nervous and out of breath. I can't prove this, but I could tell that this was not something he had done before. That was the only time I'd ever been mugged, and I don't know what other muggers sound like, but I just know that guy had never done it before. I think he was hesitating. At one point, I even remember the driver yelling, "Hurry up, man." He yelled back, "I am hurrying, bro, she is right here." He kept looking at Michael. Michael looked back. I could not see their faces, but something in that moment told me they knew each other. He took my wallet and phone, then ran back to the car and they drove away. Michael stood still. He did not help, but to be fair, I don't know what he could have done. You never know what someone with a gun might do if you make the wrong move. I was in shock, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I told Michael we should go to the police. He kept insisting we should still get guava nectar so I could calm down. I had just been robbed and he was offering me juice. I had no phone and no way to call anyone, and somehow we were still walking to get guava nectar. We got guava nectar and then walked back. When we finally got to the car, I told him again that I wanted to go to the police. This time I said that if he refused, I would ask someone else in the parking lot to call. He finally said okay. At the station, we gave our statements and it got even stranger. I said the car was gray because I knew what I saw. Michael said it was white. I said there had been a driver who yelled, "Hurry up, man." Michael said there was no driver, that it was the same person who got back into the driver's seat of the car and drove himself off. He kept adding little changes. The officers were polite, but I could feel their patience thinning. When they realized we were giving them two different stories, one of them sighed. She said she could not really investigate if two people who were both there could not agree on what happened. I knew right then they were not going to investigate this any further. Michael drove me home. When my parents found out what had happened, they were furious. My mom told me never to talk to Michael again. She did not need to repeat herself. Thankfully, I did not lose much. My wallet was easy to replace and I needed a new phone anyway. I have lived in East LA ever since that summer. 8 years later, I have never had another bad experience here. The more I think about that night, the more I am convinced that Michael planned it. I can still remember how he stalled to give them more time to come and mug me. I can still remember how calm he stayed through all of it. I can still remember how he tried to give the police completely different information from what had really happened. No way that was all an accident. Since then, I've seen Michael a few times at different things. He always wants to make small talk and invite me to things. I keep my guard up and don't agree to anything. Hello all. I would like to share something that occurred to me many years ago. My mates don't believe this happened, and I have recounted it many times. I can assure all who read this that it did 100% happen, unfortunately. Back in 1995, at the tender age of 16, I was training to join the British Army. This basically involved a 5-mile run, which I did every day except Wednesday. My run used to take me from my house in Falmouth, Cornwall, which happened to be on a steep hill. Our back garden was right next to a well-kept graveyard, which led to the downhill route right onto the seafront. To start the run, I used a tree to jump over the 4-foot-high wooden fence into the graveyard as a shortcut, then start my run. While taking my runs, I would usually head out between 11 at night and 1 in the morning. I loved the fact that the seafront was usually very peaceful and very pleasant to run along, and normally no one else would be around. Until this night in particular. On this run, I remember the weather was horrendous. The rain was incredibly powerful and blowing in horizontally across the sea with very powerful gale force winds, and the run was hard going. At around the halfway mark, I came across a strange sight. A man pushing a lawnmower in the middle of the road at around 12:30 at night in this weather. It doesn't sound odd normally, but it struck me as odd. This has nothing to do with what happened, but it was just an odd night all around. Putting this strange lawnmower man out of my mind, I started my run back. It was against the wind and my energy was being sapped rapidly. I made it to the final stretch of my run, an extremely steep hill called Spurnin Wyn, which at the time I used to sprint up to end my run. I did that as usual this night. Upon reaching the top, I stopped to get my breath, and I could feel a strange sensation. I could sense myself being watched. I will always remember this moment, as it seemed like slow motion. I looked to my left and about 15 feet away stood a large man with a short beard. His shoulders were slumped, but he was staring intently right at me, just standing still in the torrential rain and horrible winds. Looking back, I try to picture what he was wearing, but I can't. I just remember his face and the overriding fact that this guy was just standing still by the road at that time of night in that kind of weather. Our eyes met. I could tell by his whole demeanor that he wasn't friendly. He had an aggressive look, especially in his eyes, and something inside me told me to run, which I did. The instant I started to run, he started sprinting after me too. I have no idea how, but all of a sudden I went from being exhausted from my already 5 miles of hill running to having what felt like Olympian standard speed and stamina. It was like some primal instinct came alive inside that said, no matter what, I could not allow this guy to catch hold of me. In front of me lay 2 routes. One was downhill and around, then back up another steep hill to my front door, which is by far the longest route. The other was about 50 meters to the right, the entrance to the graveyard which led to the backyard. That way was much closer and flatter, but also had no lighting whatsoever. Still, I decided that would be the best way. The whole way through, I could hear him running after me. I didn't know how close he was. I daren't look back as the graveyard is pitch black, and I knew if I did, I would trip over a curb or something. But I knew he was close enough for me to hear him. I could feel the panic rising in me as I approached my fence, which I practically vaulted to get over. With one hand on the fence top, I cleared it in no time at all, then ran into my house and locked the door. To make matters worse, my room was in a converted utility room right by the back door. So, running to my bedroom window and looking out, I could see the man staring over the fence at our house. Luckily, he couldn't see me, but I could see him. My mates and family have said, "Why didn't you run and alert your mom in the house?" But I couldn't dare take my eyes off this mentalist. After what I remember as seeming like a good hour, he finally went away, but I couldn't sleep. I stayed by my window all night until the morning, fearful he could somehow sense I was awake or asleep and return. I always wonder what would have happened if he had gotten hold of me that night. It scared me so much at the time, and not only that, years later I still replay it in my mind every now and then and think, what if? About a week ago, I'd met some friends at a pub to say farewell, as one was leaving the city to attend university. I'm always pretty skint, so I didn't drink at all, and by the time 9:30 rolled around, my friend and I were ready to leave and start the walk home. Walking this friend home would usually leave me with only 10 to 15 minutes of walking alone, so I never really had any qualms about walking the rest of the journey myself. I'm a 19-year-old female, but I'm tall and I'm able to overpower the majority of my male friends, so in my mind, this means I'm invincible. I live in a suburb at the edge of my city, and it's a pretty woody area. For some reason, this particular night I felt a gut instinct that something bad might happen. So instead of taking my usual route that included walking through approximately 40 seconds of overgrown bushes and almost complete darkness, I changed my route at the last minute and walked along a well-lit road, knowing that this would add another 10 minutes to my journey. I get about halfway down the road, one headphone in and watching in front of me for a shadow joining my own, when I notice headlights behind me that weren't passing. I turn around and see a car idling at about 10 miles per hour. Google is telling me this is about 16 kilometers per hour for those of you reading from the US. The car slowly passes me and about a meter in front of me pulls up. I'm a bit of a paranoid person, and feeling uneasy I acknowledged I was probably just being stupid, but I chose to cross the road before passing this car as a matter of precaution, and that's what I do. I take another 10 or so steps before the car pulls out of its parking spot and pulls up again right in front of me, on the side of the path I was now on. If any of you have ever seen the film Limitless, it felt exactly like the high the character portrays. I stop dead in my tracks and calmly look at the car. The engine is still running. There's a single passenger in the driver's seat, and he's turned to face me. I then look at my surroundings, and it was like I was running through all the possible options in my head within about 3 seconds. I never reached a conclusion before I suddenly turned and bolted down an alleyway that I was hoping led to a pedestrian route between the two roads that run parallel with each other. At this point in time, I honestly just did not give a damn about anything except getting in with every single limb intact. This part of the story actually makes me laugh, but isn't detrimental to the situation at all. After I pulled out of the alley and bolted along the pedestrian path, I was gaining speed on a man in his 40s while he was listening to music and walking his dog. I must have scared the life out of him, because the moment he saw me plummeting towards him, he let out the most blood-curdling scream. I guess he felt pretty stupid when I just zoomed right on past. I got to the bottom of the pedestrian path to a road sitting horizontally to both my route and the cars. Parts of the path are visible from the road, but for the most part it's discreet and still pedestrian only. Sprinting through this bit, I was about to reach the subway that runs underneath the horizontal road into some housing areas. Again, this route is pedestrianized and not accessible by car. I look to my right where the bottom of the road matches up, and I can see the guy stalling at the bottom, and because of the street lamps behind him, I could make out him leaning over and looking about. I pick up my pace and return home about a minute or so later, completely safe and entirely pumped from the adrenaline. I'm still not 100% sure that this was as sinister as I think it is, and I know that I had done many things that could have only perpetuated the situation. But now I've shared that with you, I just really want to ask one question. Do I have the right to be afraid to leave my house alone at night after this experience?